I greet you all and welcome you to the lesson. The subject is auditing and assurance. Today we are going to study Lien custody on working. Lien custody on working papers, which refers to the auditor's right to retain possession of their working papers until the client has paid the professional fees due for the audit engagement. So it is the right, it refers to the right to retain possession of working paper. It refers to the right to retain possession of working papers until when? Until the client has paid the professional fee due. Until due for the audit engagement. Lien custody on working paper refers to the right to retain possession of working papers until the client has paid the professional fee due for the audit engagement. So if Auditor A has been engaged by Company B to carry out an audit, Auditor A has the right to retain possession of working papers. In our previous sessions, candidates, we have defined working papers as audit documentation. We've seen the content of working papers, the form of working papers. So those working papers are to be retained by the auditor until the client has paid professional fee due. That is what we refer to as Lien custody on working papers. So that refers to ownership of working papers. Let's break it down. Ownership. It refers to the ownership. You understand? Working papers are the auditor's property. It's auditor's property until the client has paid the professional fee due for the audit engagement. And in Kenya, candidates consistent with international auditing standards, that is ISA 230, which ISPAC members generally follow, audit papers are the property of the auditor, and they are the auditor's record of the work done, the evidence obtained, and the conclusions reached in forming their audit opinion. And that is irrespective of whether the audit is statutory or not. We may also have client's documents. Let's see what happens to the client's documents. We may have client's documents vis-a-vis auditor's working papers. Now, it is crucial to distinguish between documents belonging to the client, because we know the working papers may include also documents that the client gave the auditor. There are times when the client may give the auditor certain documents which form part of audit documentation, like the accounting records, the title deeds, the contracts, and so on. Then on the other hand, we may have auditors' working papers, like the audit programs, the checklist analysis, the audit procedures performed, the conclusions that are reached, and so on. And here, candidates, it is important to note that the auditor generally cannot withhold original client documentation. The clients that the auditor has been provided with, the auditor cannot withhold the original client's documents. So that's why we are discussing here client's documents. As much as the working papers are the auditor's property, there is an exception, which is the client's documents, original documents. that is not the auditor's property, and the auditor cannot withhold such original client's documents. You understand? Yes. So these are very important aspect of the lineal custody on working papers. Then the second important aspect is the concept of lien, what we call the retaining lien. Lien. What do we mean by retaining lien? Now, a retaining lien is a common law right that allows a professional to retain possession of a client's property until fees owed for services rendered in relation to that property are paid. So in the audit context, that means an auditor might exercise a lien over their own working papers if the client has not paid for the audit services. If the client has not paid for the audit services. That's a very important aspect to understand. The concept of lien, which is the retaining lien. You understand? And in the context of the Kenyan legal framework, particularly the Accountants Act and regulations, the Act establishes the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya as the regulatory body for the accounting profession, and the Act empowers ISPAC to set standards of professional practice and ethical conduct. And while the Act itself may not explicitly detail liens on working papers, the regulations and professional guidelines issued by ISPAC, as well as common law principles, would govern lienor custody on working papers. You understand? So we have the professional guidelines. ISPAC has developed professional guidelines in line with the international standards. And as the professional body, ISPAC provides guidance to its members on ethical and professional conduct, and their guidelines will generally align with the international best practices from bodies like the International Federation of Accountants and also the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, whose international standards on auditing are adopted in Kenya. So even with the lien, auditors must maintain confidentiality over client information. As much as you are saying that the auditor here has the right to retain the working papers, the auditor is bound with the ethical standards like confidentiality, unless disclosure is required by law. For example, a court order or when the auditor is under professional duty to disclose such information to a regulatory body. Furthermore, candidates' professional standards often dictate that an auditor should not use a lien to cause undue harm to the client, especially if it prevents the client from meeting statutory obligations like filing audited financial statements by a deadline or defending legal proceedings. And in such cases, the auditor may be expected to provide reasonable access or even copies, possibly under terms that protect their lien. And such terms could be maybe payment of a portion of the fees or a formal undertaking. So do you understand, candidates? That's all we can say about the lien, nor custody on working papers, which is the right to retain possession of working papers until the client has paid professional fee due for the audit engagement. So if you are an auditor of a company, you've done your work, you've completed the work, the client has delayed in paying your professional fee due for the audit engagement, then you have the right to retain the possession of working papers until that fee is paid. Because ordinarily, working papers are owned by the auditor. It's the auditor's property, with the exception of the original documents that the client may have given the auditor. The auditor has no right to withhold original documents that were provided to him by the client. We've gone ahead to describe the retaining lien. In this lesson, we've also stated the Kenya legal framework, what the provisions of the Accountants Act, and also the professional guidelines that have been developed by the ISPAC and international standards. So thank you for attending the lesson on Lien custody on working papers. I'll meet you in the next session where I'll continue to share knowledge in auditing. Bye-bye.